So I will move that House File 2486 be recommended to be re-referred to the State and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee. Just so everyone in the public and members have an outline here, I will have Representative Frazier introduce the bill. Then I will move the DE amendment and explain that a bit. And so we will vote on that. And then we will turn to public testimony on this bill. Just given the extreme amount of interest in it, we have limited testimony of both supporters and opponents to 20 minutes apiece. We did, because the supporters were organized, we let them divide up the 20 minutes as they saw fit. So there will be some testifiers there speaking a little bit longer. For the opponents, there were quite a few who signed up. They will be allowed each 2 minutes to speak, but it should cumulatively equal about 20 minutes. So welcome to the committee, Representative Frazier. Sorry for that long introduction. Just want to give people a roadmap here. Please describe your bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Vice Chair and committee members. Good to be back, and it's always robust conversations in here. And I do want to say I appreciate all the folks that are here to support this bill, and also those that are here to share their thoughts about the bill as well. I mean, I think it shows us how important we appreciate the democracy that we have in our elections that we have here in the state of Minnesota. So today I'm here to present House File 2486. House File 2486 will establish a task force to engage election officials, state and local lawmakers, and community members for the purpose of assessing the adoption and implementation of statewide ranked choice voting and recommending implementation standards for the local adoption. The task force will convene to address and resolve the critical questions that must be answered to ensure that ranked choice voting will be a seamless transition so that Minnesota will maintain its high level of voter participation when ranked choice voting is implemented. But most importantly, we want to ensure that we get this right because the benefits that ranked choice voting offers. No matter the outcome of the election, ranked choice voting changes the relationship between candidates and voters, forcing candidates to reach out beyond their base, which is beneficial for our democracy and will facilitate broader voter engagement, which in turn can lead to less polarizing campaign tactics and greater diversity in candidates. In short, ranked choice voting can lead us to the diverse representative democracy that is truly reflective of our local, county, and state demographics. Ranked choice voting gives voters the ability to rank their candidates, thereby allowing their vote to count even if their first choice does not go on to win. This empowering of voters can help to remove the spoiler effect that discourages some candidates from running and also address the frustration and disinterest that some voters experience when they believe they are wasting a vote based on our current winner-take-all system that is in place. Ranked choice voting also ensures that the winning candidate will receive a majority of the votes, thereby reflecting broader representation of the voters. There is always the question of can ranked choice voting really deliver on these claims? Well, we are lucky here in our state because we have local examples here in a few of our larger local jurisdictions. In Minneapolis, ranked choice voting has been used since 2009. Since then, the council is the most ethnically diverse and gender balanced in the city's history. The first Somali American, Latina, and Hmong candidates were elected to the city council in 2013. In 2017, the number of candidates who were women, people of color, or from different political parties was at a historic high. In 2017, competitive candidates of color ran in the mayoral race and 18 of 13 council seats, and competitive women candidates ran for mayor in 11 of the 13 council seats. In 2021, the trend continued with a broad, diverse group of candidates running and being elected in that jurisdiction. In St. Paul, our capital city, where ranked choice voting was introduced in 2011, the council was the most ethnically diverse and gender balanced in the city's history as well. In 2013, ranked choice voting elected the city's first Hmong city council member with second choice votes. The second place finisher, also a candidate of color, then went on to be the council member's chief aide. In 2015, Rebecca Noker was elected with the second choice votes to become her ward's first female council member. In 2017, Melvin Carter became the city's first African-American mayor in a highly competitive race. And in 2019, Nelsie Yang, a Hmong American woman, was elected in Ward 6, and Dai Tao was re-elected in Ward 1. Both were competitive ranked choice voting races. In closing, ranked choice voting gives voters options and allows diverse candidates an opportunity to build a truly broad coalition by focusing on the issues that impact the voters. Our democracy is an experiment, and it is always important with it being an experiment, that we continue to evolve and we continue to provide tools to create the most inclusive democracy possible. That is what ranked choice voting is. It is a tool to further that end. With that, Chair, I'll stand.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. Even though I gave a lengthy exposition about how this will work, I just realized I forgot to mention two things. First, Secretary Simon will speak between the supporters and opponents. I wasn't sure which category he fit in, so he gets his own category. And second, people did request to sign up or to speak, but we weren't able to accommodate it because of the time constraints. We directed them to submit written comments. So you will see in your packet, you have a green folder just with comments on this bill. Most of those are also posted on our website, so I would encourage everyone to review those. There's a lot of important and insightful commentary in there. So with that, I will move the DE3 amendment. And just to describe the DE3 amendment, this amendment offers revisions to House File 2486 that reflect the input from the Office of the Secretary of State, county administrators, and other members. I wasn't the main person who developed it, so if there are questions about it, I may defer to other parties, such as the Secretary of State's office or Representative Greenman. The amendment does three primary things. First, it authorizes local jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting in local elections if they choose, and creates uniform standards for local jurisdictions who adopt ranked choice voting. Second, it creates a task force to assess the adoption and implementation of ranked choice voting in federal and state elections, and to make recommendations on the implementation issues with the local option. The task force would have 25 members made up of elections administrators, elected leaders, community advocates, and government leaders. 13 of the 25 members represent election administrators charged with administering local elections. We received quite a bit of feedback that this was a critical group to highlight in the composition of the task force, given the complexity of some of the issues that they'd be looking at. We also received quite a bit of email support for structuring the task force this way. The amendment also further clarifies the scope of the task force's work around statewide and local adoption of ranked choice voting. Its purpose is to assess the feasibility and system readiness of statewide ranked choice voting, to make recommendations to the legislature on technology, education, and draft legislation that would be necessary to implement statewide ranked choice voting. The amendment also charges the task force with making recommendations around standards, rules, and procedures around implementing ranked choice voting in local elections in conjunction with state general elections. Finally, the amendment makes changes to address guidance from the Secretary of State's office. The amendment removes the presumption that Minnesota will adopt statewide ranked choice voting before the task force examines how this could be done, and also the impact on Minnesota's election system and the architectural changes required in Minnesota's system. The amendment also moves the implementation date of the local option provision to give time for the task force to examine the issues that will still need to be addressed as it relates to implementing ranked choice voting in conjunction with the state general election. The amendment provides guidance on where the ranked choice voting tabulation center would be if there are multiple overlapping ranked choice voting jurisdictions. And it makes changes to ensure that all of the state requirements for the way to request write-in votes be counted, ballots be handled and delivered by election judges, and certification procedures and timelines are followed in conjunction with ranked choice voting elections. I think maybe to get the bill kind of in the shape the committee wants it, we should adopt that amendment at this point. And I don't see any discussion. So all in favor of adopting the amendment, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Okay, the amendment is adopted. So we will turn now to public testimony. So our first public testifier is Congresswoman Mary Peltola. It's an honor to have a congressperson from another state here. I don't know the last time this has happened, so really appreciate you coming to Minnesota, Congresswoman. Thank you for being here, and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is my microphone on? No?
It's a little quiet.
Okay, how about now?
That
Better?
sounds much better.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure to come to Minnesota. Good morning. Okay. Okay. I said it's always a pleasure to come to Minnesota, and good morning.
We will be updating this building with hopefully better microphones in the near future, but thank you for bearing with us.
I'll use my outdoor voice. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I'm not here to tell you what choice this body should make. That is up to the Minnesotan voters and their elected representatives. But I am glad to share with all of you my personal experience with ranked choice voting. I'll smile, I guess, for the picture. In 2020, Alaskans voted to establish a nonpartisan primary and ranked choice voting system in our elections. 2022 was the first year that we used this new system. In every state and federal election, from the governor's race to one of our U.S. senators, almost all of the legislative seats, and my own congressional race, voters could rank the top 4 candidates that advanced after an open, nonpartisan primary. Despite initial worries, voter turnout was at similar levels to what it was during the 2018 midterm elections. Reports of issues with the voting system were negligible, and the vast majority of voters ranked multiple candidates. This was in part due to significant voter education efforts from our state government, reinforced by outreach from parties and candidates. Our State Division of Elections found fun and educational ways to share crucial information, like holding a mock vote for Alaska's favorite seafood. In the 3rd round, king crab won out, even though I was a strong king salmon supporter. Voters in my election had the opportunity to rank 4 different candidates that all had unique viewpoints. In the end, up and down the ballot, voters tended to elect candidates that had broad appeal and minimized negative campaigning. Alaskan voters elected a conservative Republican governor, a moderate Republican senator, and a consensus-building Democratic congresswoman, and tripartisan coalitions in both houses of our state legislature. These results demonstrate that Alaskan voters were able to make conscientious, informed decisions using the ranked choice system to elect an ideologically diverse set of candidates for the various offices up for election. Ranked choice voting rewards candidates that can build broad coalitions of voters and bring people together. In my state, our ranked choice system allowed me to run a positive campaign and focus on issues that voters care about. In order to win, I could not afford to alienate or ignore supporters of my opponents, as their 2nd and 3rd choice votes were critical in deciding who won. With ranked choice voting, you have to be willing to listen to every voter. You have to at least consider opposing points of view. RCV brings more voices to the table and motivates candidates to be the best choice for voters rather than just the least harmful. In my race, we talked to voters from all parties, from hardcore Democrats to swing voters to even strong Republicans. We campaigned in every part of the state, from the most urban portions of Anchorage to heavily conservative towns in the Matanuska-Susitna Valley to the most rural villages in western Alaska. I could not take any vote for granted nor write any voter off. Ranked choice voting incentivizes this type of inclusive, big tent politics and encourages candidates to build broad coalitions in order to be successful. It's also worth noting that ranked choice voting does not punish conservative candidates, as some critics have suggested. Alaska's conservative governor won re-election in the 1st round with an absolute majority of the vote, and a conservative-led coalition was elected to the majority of our state house for the first time since 2016. The type of governance that we have can directly be traced to the incentives of our electoral systems. Gridlock and polarization have become a mainstay of Washington, D.C., in part because of the past system having driven candidates towards negativity, casting their opponents as evil, and reducing voters' choices to the lesser of 2 evils. In Alaska, we have a bipartisan coalition in both houses of the state legislature. Our bipartisan congressional delegation routinely collaborates for the good of our state. We release joint statements almost as often as we do individual ones. Our politicians understand that if they want to be reelected, they have to be willing to work with the other side and at least show the voters that they are willing to listen to alternative perspectives. Of course, this does not mean that we don't have fundamental disagreements with one another. We do, as we should in a democracy. Rather, the ranked choice voting system makes us more willing to engage with one another where there is room for agreement, instead of retreating deeper into our own ideological corners. Once again, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, and I hope my statement has been helpful in showing how the ranked choice system works in practice.
Thank you for your testimony, Congresswoman Peltola, and thank you for your patience in the first bill as well. The next testifier is Kim Nelson, and after Kim Nelson will be Lynn Eaton. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. I'm Kim Nelson, and I'm a longtime business leader here in Minnesota, and I'm here to express business support for ranked choice voting. Minnesota businesses are proud to contribute to the growth and well-being of the great state of Minnesota. And to successfully sustain our growth, we need stability and predictability in our operating environment, and we depend on good governance in our state. We rely on elected officials to negotiate bipartisan solutions that address the many major issues our community faces, like ensuring public safety, ensuring our youth are prepared to join the workforce, and building the modern infrastructure needed to support our state's growing economy. These solutions are essential to our ability to conduct business and to attract and retain employees, and they're critical to the long-term prosperity of Minnesota. Political extremism is incompatible with the needs of Minnesota business. Many business leaders support ranked choice voting because by requiring candidates to achieve 50% of the vote, it disincentivizes extremism and personal attacks and incentivizes policy-driven campaigns designed to appeal to the broad center of the electorate. Candidates who focus on personal attacks will be unlikely to secure the second or third vote of their opponent's supporters. This simple, effective reform is a bipartisan opportunity, and that's why our ranked choice voting has been championed by Republicans in red states like Utah and Alaska, and by Democrats in blue states like Maine and Massachusetts. RCV elections are more competitive, voter turnout is higher, and campaigns are more civil. Studies show that voters find RCV easy to use, and they like that it eliminates the spoiler effect and allows them to vote their preferences. RCV also eliminates costly runoff elections like we've seen in places like Georgia and, yes, here in Minnesota. Our political system works best when elected officials work together to hammer out the kind of bipartisan legislation that can stand the test of time. This provides the climate of stability we need to invest, expand, and build our businesses and Minnesota's economy. In the spirit of supporting the adoption of effective bipartisan legislation, I join a number of local business leaders who've signed the letter before you, urging you to adopt ranked choice voting statewide. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Lynn Eaton, and after Lynn Eaton will be Jonathan Wharton. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, representatives. My name is Lynn Eaton. I am from Bemidji, Minnesota, where my wife and I have lived for almost 40 years. Our children were born and educated in Bemidji and now have families of their own. I've been a public servant my entire career. For 30 years, I worked for the Department of Transportation, and following my retirement in 2014, I continued to work as an engineering consultant. In my profession and my capacity as an engineer, I have seen how much citizens depend on well-run services and how partisanship at the state capitol causes shutdowns, cynicism, unacceptable delays, and interruption of planning cycles. These interruptions and delays are costly. The time taken to develop important public works goes to waste when our legislative representatives choose partisanship and legislative gridlock over collaborative discussion that enhances the common good. The citizens of this state and my community deserve the service and respect that broadly supported elected officials can provide. We need to choose between candidates who are willing to do the work of the people they represent instead of adhering to political affiliations and ideological thinking. I currently hold a non-political office as Ward 5 Councilor for the City of Bemidji, but my presence here today and the thoughts I convey are my own. I am speaking for myself and my belief that our children deserve better service from our elected officials. I believe voters, especially younger voters, are so disillusioned by today's political rhetoric, partisanship, and legislative stalemate that they decide not to step into the voting booth to choose between two political ideologies. For them, that is not a meaningful choice. Last night, the Bemidji Charter Commission voted to forward a resolution of support for ranked choice voting to put forward to the Bemidji City Council. There is genuine interest and excitement about the positive benefits of this method of electing representatives. My life service includes volunteering for professional and public organizations, leading civic organizations, as well as leadership roles within my faith community. I've discussed the idea of ranked choice voting with my fellow council members, others in my constituency, my family's friends and acquaintances from across the nation. All of these conversations have noted the very positive potential outcomes from the opportunity of ranked choice voting. Lastly, we must take steps today to give our children hope for a brighter, more positive future. Our Anishinaabe neighbors make decisions while thinking of the next 7 generations. I challenge our state's highest legislative authority to do the same. I ask you to vote in favor of ranked choice voting. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony, Council Member, and thank you for coming all the way down, although there is, in fact, somebody who traveled farther than you to come here. Next up is Jonathan Wharton, and after Jonathan Wharton will be Storm Novak. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. My name is Jonathan Wharton. I am a Minneapolis resident and a volunteer with Fair Vote, Minnesota, and it is more than me. I'm sure you can see a lot of orange shirts like mine in the audience, and it is more than us. Everyone in this room, be they members of the audience, clerks, media, and you distinguished members, can agree that our current election system is in need of change for the better, and the time is now. When I attended the Senate Elections Committee hearing for this bill last week, I remember testimony from Nelsie Yang, the first Hmong American woman to be elected to St. Paul's City Council. Councilperson Yang talked about the benefits she's seen from the ranked choice process in St. Paul, and her testimony really moved me. We are seeing in real time how ranked choice voting provides greater opportunity to women and people of color by opening the process to more candidates and new voices, incentivizing positive campaigns based on the issues and not on personal attacks. Many of us live in communities with issues that we want to fix at the local level. I do. I live in East Phillips, one of the most racially diverse neighborhoods in the state, but also the neighborhood that experiences some of the worst racial health disparities because of toxic and environmental pollution. Many of us in systematically problematic communities like mine are looking for candidates that understand our struggles. We recognize with ranked choice voting, having more good options for quality candidates eliminates the risk of vote splitting between candidates with like platforms or candidates from similar communities or backgrounds. I love the opportunity to vote the way I do in my Minneapolis local races by ranking candidates who share great ideas for enacting positive change for people in my community. We need a strong community-minded task force to ensure those voices are heard, and the opportunity to create a system that works for all is advanced. It is with your help that we can do some real good for communities across Minnesota. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Storm Novak, and after Storm Novak will be Henry Jimenez. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, I'm Storm Novak. Good morning, legislators, staffers, and members of the public. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify on a topic that I'm truly very passionate about and something that I believe is the greatest step that we can take forward to ensure fairer and more representative elections for the future. I'm a college student at Mankato in House District 18B, home of Representative Frederick. My district, like many others, is home to an overwhelming body of young voters, and those young voters would love to see statewide ranked choice voting become a reality for Minnesota. We believe in this electoral reform because its very essence is to ensure that the interest of the majority of voters is represented within our elections. I originally got my start in political advocacy working on a campaign in rural Minnesota in District 11B, home to Representative Nelson. That's where I first came face to face with a constituent who flat out refused to vote. And I asked them why. They told me in plain and simple terms that they did not feel like any of the candidates represented them. And that is fair. Many people want more choice. We know that it has been proven that ranked choice voting encourages a greater diversity of candidates to run for office and a greater diversity of choices. With ranked choice voting, everyone has a chance to vote for a candidate that they feel can actually represent them without having to worry about spoiler candidates or the concept of throwing away their vote. And we can see this in effect within Minneapolis, where we've seen 2 Black transgender individuals elected to the Minneapolis City Council, whereas under a winner-take-all system, those underrepresented, marginalized groups struggle to find any representation in government. Ranked choice voting is one of, if not the best things that we can do to guarantee a more representative and fair election process for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. The final testifier on the supporters side is Henry Jimenez. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Henry Jimenez. I'm here to express my strong support for House File 2486, which provides an option for all local jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voting if they wish, and establish a task force to recommend how RCV would be implemented in state and federal elections. Remember, if they wish, this is important. RCV is proven to promote more inclusive representation and higher turnout elections, and this is exactly what we need right now in our democracy. This is what our BIPOC communities need. This is what everyone in Minnesota needs. I also applaud the bill for creating a task force of stakeholders that will have the time and opportunity to assess, deliberate, and ultimately recommend how RCV will work at state level. I'm thrilled that the bill includes representation from the state ethnic councils. As the former executive director of the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs, this is exactly the kind of representation needed on task forces created by the legislature. Good job. Minnesota is in a strong position to lead on this pro-voter initiative, and the task force is the right vehicle to engage stakeholders in the process and determine the procedures and standards and timelines for statewide RCV in the most effective and timely way possible. Leading is what Minnesota does best, and now is the moment for us to continue to show the rest of the nation how to advance a democracy that is inclusive, participatory, representative, and responsive for all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, thank you for your testimony. That concludes the testimony from the supporters of the bill. And I will add they came in well under the 20 minutes allocated, so I didn't need to cut anybody off. The next testifier is Secretary of State Steve Simon. Welcome back to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Steve Simon, Minnesota Secretary of State. It's an honor to be here today to testify on this bill as amended. The amendment has made significant improvements to the legislation, and I really want to say hats off to you, Mr. Chair, hats off to Representative Frazier for working with us on language that we think could work here. Notice that I am in a speaking order that is a little bit unique. I am neither affiliated with the proponents nor the opponents, and that's because I'm asking everyone just for a second, just for a minute, to put on hold your thoughts about the merits of ranked choice voting. Do you think it's great? Do you think it's not so great? Because I'm here to occupy a specific lane, and that is the administrative lane. How could this actually come to be? How could this actually happen? How could it actually be implemented? And from that standpoint, I have to tell you, I think I owe you my best judgment. And from an administrative standpoint, my judgment is that Minnesota is not yet ready for statewide ranked choice voting. Leave aside for a minute the arguments about whether it's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. I can tell you that it's an extraordinarily complicated thing to do. There are a lot of moving parts. You've heard, including from a very esteemed guest here, that Maine and Alaska do this statewide. But Minnesota is not Maine and Alaska. Those states have a very centralized election system with an election authority centralized at the state that does a lot more than we're used to in Minnesota. Those states do not have counties. They don't have them at all. We do have counties in Minnesota. And as a matter of fact, our system, our election system, is very much county-based. So statewide ranked choice voting could require changing the basic architecture of the Minnesota election system as we know it. Now, I'm here because I think, and I know Representative Frazier thinks, we could get to a place where that is feasible, but only if we engage in a thorough and careful examination of the many structures and rules that would have to change to accommodate a statewide ranked choice voting system. The bill as amended can get us there, I'm here to say. First and most importantly, it creates a task force that will bring a diversity of elections administrators and advocates together from across the state to assess and make recommendations, both on the statewide ranked choice voting provisions as well as on the provisions allowing for the adoption of local ranked choice voting in conjunction with a state general election. I know that's a mouthful, but right now, and forgive me, I didn't hear some of the earlier testimony, maybe it's been explained, but in Minnesota, we have 5 cities right now that do it. They have chosen to do it. But they all do it in odd year elections. We have not yet in Minnesota had the situation where a city has chosen to do it on its own for its own folks in conjunction with an even year, a statewide general election where we elect the governor or the president or all the rest. That's what I'm referring to. So bringing elections administrators together with advocates to assess the feasibility, the challenges, and the necessary procedural and law changes before the state implements these changes is critical. And since my time here in the Minnesota House, serving in the Minnesota House, I've strongly and still strongly support the ability of all local jurisdictions to adopt ranked choice voters if they determine that it's the right thing for their community and the right thing for their voters. But of course, we need to make sure that we've thought through and addressed all the potential impacts on our election system, particularly for those local elections held in conjunction with the state general election, the idea that I'm talking about, a city doing it in the same year that we elect a governor or a president and so forth. I would have preferred personally that the legislation delay the implementation of local option ranked choice voting held in an even year until the task force could examine potential issues. But I appreciate that the bill as amended delays the implementation of ranked choice voting by statutory cities until 2025, which does give us until 2026 to determine how local option ranked choice voting can best be achieved in conjunction with a state election. Since the legislation presumes that we will have a local option ranked choice voting election in conjunction with a state election in 2026, I just want to emphasize how important it is for legislators to take seriously the recommendations that will be coming out of the task force, because those recommendations will likely include proposed changes to state election law. There are large policy and practical considerations that I'm hopeful the task force can assess regarding a local ranked choice voting election that coincides with the statewide general elections, things like ballot order, allowing cities to deviate from state standards in an even year. Then there's the issue of cities like St. Cloud, which fall into more than one county. St. Cloud falls into 3 different counties. And the practical challenges of potentially having a second ballot card. In other words, one ballot card that's ranked choice voting and another ballot card for all the other races that isn't. We just have to think those things through. All of these issues and more have to be addressed by the task force before we set the implementation date. And we can almost certainly solve these issues for local level ranked choice voting contests. But when it comes to elections, as you know better than anyone, members, because you sit on this committee, the details really do matter. And we should ensure that we're addressing these issues in the task force before implementation. Again, I want to say, I can't say enough about Representative Frazier's leadership, about his flexibility, about his willingness to listen and to hear and take seriously the concerns being raised, not just by us, but by elections administrators across the state. And this amendment, this bill as amended, makes significant changes in response to those concerns that I and others have expressed. So I want to thank him. I want to thank everyone in this room for their activism, no matter what side you're on. I'm occupying a very specific space, talking about a very specific lane. But thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you for your testimony, Secretary Simon. We will turn now to people who have signed up to testify in opposition to the bill. And there are several. So first on the list is Brian Cook, and after Brian Cook will be Jonathan Annette. And if you could keep your testimony to approximately 2 minutes, that will enable us to stick within that 20-minute guideline. So welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Chair Freiberg, members of the Elections, Finance, and Policy Committee, Representative Frazier. My name is Brian Cook, and I'm the Director of Elections Policy for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to express some of our concerns with House File 2486. The Minnesota Chamber, which represents more than 6,300 businesses with over 500,000 employees, supports changes to Minnesota's state election process to allow for greater voter contact and participation. We believe that Minnesota should maintain the traditional method of balloting, where voters select one candidate per office sought in single-seat elections or a set number of candidates in multiple-seat elections. While RCV is promoted as a means to reduce polarization, increase participation, and lower costs, academic studies and actual experience call into question those conclusions. Minnesota's experience with RCV bears this out. Further, RCV presents voters who have just one preference in a race with a dilemma: either vote for a candidate whom the voter does not know or support, or risk having their voter power diminished by a person who makes more than one selection. The bill also delegates the work of developing the implementation of a statewide RCV system to an ever-growing 26-member task force. This task force has representation from local units of government, labor unions, and others. While it has outsized representation from other organizations that advocate for RCV, the business community is notably left out with no seat at the table. It is our strongly held belief that Minnesota businesses remain active and engaged in elections, not only because they represent a collective voice for the private sector, just as labor unions represent a collective voice for their workers, but because policy and political decisions impact them just as much. Finally, our state's participation in elections and our election laws and practices have been held up as a point of pride nationally, rightfully so. Minnesota has a long-standing tradition of requiring bipartisan support for significant election law changes, a standard that has promoted stability and helped Minnesotans retain their voice at critical times. We believe bipartisanship should remain the standard in this policy area, especially when it comes to fundamental changes to the way in which we conduct elections. Significant modifications to our electoral system that are not consensus-based will lead to a back and forth of changes based on whoever is in power, which is a result that we believe is not in the best interest of Minnesotans. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list is Jonathan Annette, and after Jonathan Annette will be Linda Blair. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good, how are you doing? Thank you, Chair Freiberg, House members, members of this committee, and friends such as Lead Torgelson. My name is Jonathan Onsted. I'm the chair of the Minnesota ElectionIntegrity.org organization. It's a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to all aspects of elections operations here in Minnesota. A recent Real Clear Politics poll found that 62% of Americans are very concerned or somewhat concerned about the state of elections in this country. Thank you, by the way, to Secretary of State Simon to suggest to slow this ranked choice voting issue down. Ranked choice voting is not the solution to an already ailing election system here in Minnesota. It is a solution in search of a problem that it does not solve. It will only make a bad system worse. I've been involved in Minnesota elections since the Coleman-Franken and Emmer-Dayton recounts as a team lead. I've been a volunteer election judge, poll watcher, and now I chair the largest volunteer election integrity organization in the state, with over 250 people statewide. We were formed in February of 2021, and I have 8 subcommittees working on all aspects of election integrity, including ranked choice voting. Please visit our website when you get a chance. I encourage you to look into the formation and background of Fair Vote, who testifies here today. They are well funded to the tune of $1.3 million dedicated in the calendar year 2023 to push ranked choice voting in Minnesota. Their funding all comes from left-leaning dark money organizations. Please ask yourself these questions as you contemplate ranked choice voting. Why is the DFL pushing so hard to adopt ranked choice voting in Minnesota with no Republican sponsors? Why is Fair Vote so well funded with full-time employees dedicated only to this effort in Minnesota? I ask you to please educate yourselves as to how ranked choice voting works. Please listen to the other testifiers today and read what they've written about the difficulties with the ranked choice system voting. It is an overly complicated system that does not solve any of the problems here in Minnesota. It has not taken the rancor and partisanship out of municipal elections, as you've heard here today. All you have to do is look at some of the recent, very contentious municipal elections in Minneapolis. And most importantly, and I want to make this point very clear, ranked choice voting does not adhere to the constitutionally guaranteed one person, one vote America was written on.
If you could wrap
Thank
up
you very much for your time today.
Thank you. And just for future testifiers, we have a policy here not to kind of impugn the motives of people or organizations, whether within the legislature or outside of the legislature, so please refrain from doing that. The next testifier is Linda Blair, and after Linda Blair will be Mark Bonhorst. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Linda Blair. I'm a Bloomington resident and election judge. I believe elections should be uncomplicated. Ranked choice voting complicates the process. As a Bloomington election judge, I saw firsthand that many voters were unclear and confused. Those that did understand this process expressed frustration over its complications. I personally witnessed many spoiled ballots from diverse voters who use English as their second language. Ranking the votes caused frustration and took them longer to complete their ballot. I even witnessed one frustrated voter have their ballot spit back out of the tabulator again and then just say, it doesn't matter, and walk out in frustration. Ranked choice voting will disenfranchise voters. Voting should be simple. Under ranked choice voting, how many pages will each voter have to wade through on a presidential ballot for them to be able to have the space to rank that each race? It will be very cumbersome for the voter, the candidate, and the election staff. Most races go beyond that first round, leaving the voter who ranked a candidate in only one round in jeopardy of exhausting their ballot, while the other voters who chose the loser of each round may get a second, third, or fourth vote through redistribution. I believe we should maintain our one person, one vote, because it is a true reflection of the people's choice, not some convoluted ranking formula. Proponents of the House File 2486 say ranked choice voting will make elections less divisive. Ranked choice voting doesn't change how campaign dollars are spent on negative ads. Spending decisions by the campaigns and the special interest groups make elections divisive, not the marking and the counting of the ballots. Ranked choice voting will not make elections less divisive. It hasn't worked that way in Bloomington, at least. It only changes how voters mark a ballot and those ballots are counted. Why are we pushing to change the Minnesota voting laws this year? The Secretary of State isn't asking for this change. Regular Minnesotans aren't asking for this change. This is the agenda of one special interest group. Your job is to represent all Minnesotans. Rushing to enact this law, a law requiring an unelected task force many years to reveals the inappropriateness of this change in our voting laws. This is a time to regain the confidence and trust of voters, not to rewrite and write a sloppy law. I ask you to reject ranked choice voting for Minnesota. I thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Mark Bonhorst, and after Mark Bonhorst will be David Clark. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg and members of the committee. Mark Bonhorst from Minneapolis. I'm really more in Steve Simon's lane. I have a particular matter to bring before the committee. I have been researching and studying presidential election reform for 6 years. So I want to talk about what ranked choice voting bill and other approaches might mean for presidential elections. A voting system that assures that presidential electors are chosen by a majority of the voters is the single most important near-term reform of the Electoral College that is achievable. Ranked choice voting is a great way to do that, but implementation will be delayed at least one election cycle and maybe more. That delay is not necessary. The task force should be empowered at least to consider an alternative that could be in effect in 2024 for presidential elections. That alternative is approval voting. Administratively, that alternative requires one change on existing ballots. Change vote for one to vote for one or more. Nothing else about the election system changes. That's it. Voters vote for more than one favored ticket, add up the votes. The ticket with the most votes wins. It's called an election. 3 key points. 1, impeccable constitutional credentials. Approval voting was the founders' own alternative voting system for presidential elections. It was discussed favorably at the Constitutional Convention by the people who wrote the Electoral College, and it was embodied in the Electoral College and was used during our first 4 elections. Point 2, equally effective. These 2 systems are equally effective in avoiding the spoiler effect. Under both, the votes of all voters who approve either of the leading candidates are counted. 3, the kicker, timing. Approval voting is so simple, it probably could be implemented in 2024 for presidential elections. Ranked choice voting will not. I think if we can implement the most important achievable reform in the Electoral College now, rather than later, we should do it now. And I hope the committee and the members of the audience agree. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is David Clark, and after David Clark will be Annette Meeks. Welcome to the committee. Once you've had a seat, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. My name is David Clark. I'm Executive Chair of a group called Residents for Better Bloomington. We're a Bloomington-based nonpartisan group that's a nonprofit as well. And we're a watchdog group. We watch what happens at the City Council, we watch what happens at the school board, and at the state. You know, when ranked choice voting first started being brought up in Bloomington, we knew it was not popular. In fact, Fair Vote had to spend $165,000 in a slick marketing campaign in order to get people to vote for it. And even with that effort, it only won by a 0.2% margin in the election in 2020. So out of 50,000 votes, it only won by a 96 vote margin. Our group thought that that was indicative of the fact that at least Bloomington was divided on it. So we decided to put forth a petition last year to get it back on the ballot. Well, we were shocked with the results. We knocked on 10,000 doors, 5,000 people answered, and 3,700 people signed our petition to get ranked choice voting back on the ballot and get it hopefully voted out. That's 74% roughly of the population randomly selected. So any time of day that we went out, any day of the week, any part of town we went to, the results were the same. This is deeply unpopular in Bloomington. It's the same margin that Duluth voted it out or voted it down several years ago. Minnetonka, that city of Minnetonka actually did a resident survey. 48% of the residents said they wanted to retain the current traditional voting system. Only 22% of the respondents in Minnetonka said that they wanted ranked choice voting. This is in the August 15th minutes of the City Council of Minnetonka of last year. So you can fool yourselves into believing that this is a popular way to go with polls that come out that are carefully crafted, that are carefully worded, and people answer it in a way that seems to indicate that the majority of the people want ranked choice voting. That is not the case. The ultimate poll we took the ultimate poll, which is last year, going door to door, thousands and thousands of people we talked to, 74, 73, 74% of the Bloomington residents that we talked to said, we want ranked choice voting back in the ballot and we want it out. That's the results that we have. So I would ask you to listen to those results which are from real people randomly selected in the city of Bloomington and indicative of where people's real thoughts are on this voting system, not some poll that's only being given to certain people and carefully worded. So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Annette Meeks, and after Annette Meeks will be Karen Miller. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Representative Frazier. My name is Annette Meeks, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Freedom Foundation in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
My name is Annette Meeks.
Maybe still a little closer if you can.
My name is Annette Meeks, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Freedom Foundation in Minnesota. We devote a lot of time and attention to government transparency, which is what brings me before the committee today. Since the divisive outcome and aftermath of the 2020 election, I don't need to tell you we're living in a difficult time for our republic. Our elections are all too often surrounded by controversy, whether real or not, that arouse partisan suspicion and demands for greater transparency and accountability. History has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that ranked choice voting will do nothing to achieve greater accountability, better and cleaner campaigns, or greater transparency in future elections. As a matter of fact, you only have to consider 3 to 4 recent real-life experiences with ranked choice voting to understand why this is a very risky proposition that has been studied, and the studies show it doesn't live up to the expectations set forth by the supporters. Let's look at Alaska, the second state to adopt ranked choice voting statewide. In their 2020 special election, nearly 15,000 voters were disenfranchised when their legitimately cast ballots were not counted. They were considered exhausted ballots under ranked choice voting rules, meaning that the candidates they voted for were no longer in contention for office. Those 15,000 disenfranchised voters were a considerable portion of the electorate that voted in that election. Now Alaska is voting to repeal ranked choice voting. But it isn't just Alaska. It also happened in Maine, the first state to adopt ranked choice voting statewide. In the 2018 Democratic primary for Maine's 2nd Congressional District, nearly 9,000 voters had their voices silent by ballot exhaustion. Maine voters, too, are in the process of organizing to repeal ranked choice voting. In local elections, Sandy, Utah had 23,000 citizens participate in their 2019 mayoral election before ranked choice voting. In 2021, with ranked choice voting, voters were down to only 21,000 participating, and only 17,000 of those voters had a say in the final tally. Another 4,000 voters were disenfranchised and didn't have their ballots count. After that election, 60% of Sandy, Utah voters said, quote, "We dislike the system," and they now say ranked choice voting should not be used in future Sandy City municipal elections. I could go on, but I'll leave you with the worst possible outcome during these politically charged days. And that's a message from Alameda County, California. In their 2022 school board election, Alameda County's software was inadvertently configured wrong, so that elections used under ranked choice voting, over 200 of them were counted incorrectly.
If you could wrap up your testimony, that would be
As a result, the wrong candidate was announced the winner. 2 months later, they had to go do a dizzying recount to discover that someone else actually won the election under ranked choice voting. While our elections have many procedural issues to be addressed, to ensure future elections provide greater transparency, ranked choice voting isn't one of these options and isn't worthy of consideration in our great state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Karen Miller, and after Karen Miller will be Ellen Cousins. Welcome to the committee. Once you've had a seat, please identify yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg and committee members. My name is Karen Miller. I'm an involved citizen and election judge from Dakota County. Thank you for considering these following questions about ranked choice voting. First of all, why are we considering changing our one-person, one-vote system to one that is more confusing, diminishes voter confidence, and decreases turnout? The instructions for filling out a ranked choice ballot are not easy to explain nor easy to follow, which disenfranchises voters with English as a second language and the elderly, and leads to a higher error rate. It also depends on machines programmed with algorithms to reallocate votes, which leads to greater irregularities and voter mistrust. All of this results in lower voter turnout, as is the case in Minneapolis and St. Paul, both of which have used ranked choice voting in local elections for more than a decade. Both lag behind other major metropolitan cities in voter turnout. Why are we considering changing our one-person, one-vote system to one that actually excludes votes? With ranked choice voting, rather than counting every vote, some voters' ballots are exhausted and their voice is not expressed in the final result. For example, in a San Francisco 2010 Board of Supervisors election, after 20 rounds of tabulation, more votes were thrown out than were counted in the final result. Why are we considering a system which has a propensity to take the victory from a candidate who initially earned the greatest number of votes and award it to a less favored candidate? One example is the 2018 2nd Congressional District election in Maine. The Republican outperformed the Democrat in the first round, yet 8,000 votes were thrown out and the Democrat declared the winner. Another example of this is the Alaska 2022 special election in which the Democrat won, despite the fact that over 60% of the voters voted Republican in the first round and more than 11,000 votes were eliminated. How can this process possibly be considered fair and equitable? Minnesota cannot afford to abandon our one-person, one-vote system for one that will be more confusing, less efficient, disenfranchise voters, and create manipulated false majorities. I urge a no vote on 2486. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier is Ellen Cousins, and after Ellen Cousins will be Dale Witherington. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Cousins, and thank you for this opportunity to speak against HF 2486. Our voting system, deemed one of the best in the nation, is coming under attack by a nationally funded group whose mission is to change how we vote. This group makes many false claims and hides behind their false slogan to protect democracy. How can an election system that does the following protect democracy? This well-funded group claims with ranked choice voting, the winner is chosen by a majority of the voters. Fact, the needed majority number decreases with each round. Many voters do not have a voice in the final round, as their ballot has been eliminated. When Mayor Jacob Fry won in the 6th round of voting, 22,835 votes did not have a voice in the final choice. I believe every citizen should have the opportunity to vote on the final candidates, which is how our long-established fair voting system works in Minnesota. This is how we truly protect democracy. The supposed benefits are imaginary. California Governor Newsom stated the promise that ranked choice voting leads to greater democracy is not necessarily fulfilled. Ranked choice voting leads to voter suppression. Many voters do not have the resources to learn how to use RCV or research multiple candidates for each race, and have sadly stopped voting. Under RCV, many cities have seen a depressed voter turnout in communities of color. RCV has no benefit to our state and certainly doesn't merit any of our precious resources to form a task force to study it, especially a task force that has any representation from Fair Vote or others who have financial interests in the passage of the bill. During a failed campaign for RCV, Walter Mondale stated, "Vote no on ranked choice voting." I also urge you to please vote no and keep our voting system fair, easy, less expensive, and one of the best in the nation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. The final testifier is Dale Witherington. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Representative Frazier, thank you. My name is Dale Witherington. Some of you know me as a volunteer chaplain on both sides of the aisle here in the state of Minnesota since 2012. And I'm here to speak in opposition of HF 2486 and to make one request as you probably go forward with this anyway. My opposition is based on data demonstrating the failure of RCV in communities and states across the country after they implemented the procedure, and in some cases have already repealed the procedure. It's probable you will also be in direct violation of a Supreme Court ruling of which you may be unaware. Let's start there. RCV appears to violate a year 2000 SCOTUS case, the Democrat Party of California versus Jones. SCOTUS ruled 7-2 that there is a First Amendment fundamental right of a political party to have the party choose the candidate of their choice for a general election. RCV eliminates that. It is a constitutional right. It's a fundamental right of the association. RCV violates the constitutional right according to SCOTUS. Number two, as has been stated, former Vice President Walter Mondale, a Democrat, current governor of California, Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, the ACLU, the New York Democrats, the New York NAACP, the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus of the New York City Council all agree with the following. RCV creates less transparency in the voting process. Do we want less transparency? RCV creates voter disenfranchisement. Do we want less people voting? RCV creates voter suppression. RCV, according to the NAACP and those that I've mentioned above, is oppressive to people of color. And it does not lead to greater democracy, which, by the way, we are a constitutional republic. We are not a democracy. In closing, my request, since you are likely to go forward with this bill anyway, please include in your RCV statewide implementation task force some who are not necessarily all in with RCV. At least provide for parity and balance in the debate. Remember the words of the Declaration of Independence that, quote, "To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The governed are hurt by RCV. Don't oppress those who put you in office. Don't suppress the vote. Vote no on HF 2486. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. That concludes the testimony to the bill. So we will turn to member discussion. Representative Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would just like to point out that one of the testifiers who were supposedly in opposition to this was not in opposition. he said he did not oppose ranked choice voting, and then he went on to be a proponent of preferred voting, which ranked choice voting is considered to be preferred voting by many. And so I would ask that we, in fairness, could we have one more testifier in opposition?
Yeah, no, that I didn't hear it the same way. I'm not exactly certain what preferred voting is that testifier was speaking about, but I did hear him say he's not a fan of ranked choice voting as this bill put forward. I'd also point out the testifiers in favor of the bill spoke for approximately 17 minutes, and the opponents of the bill spoke for 23 minutes. And I don't know of a way to fairly choose one person among everyone to who gets the right to speak. When we've tried to be as consistent as possible, telling people that we've reached our limit of testifiers. But I appreciate the suggestion, Representative Davis.
Well, thank you for the consideration, Mr. Chair.
Did you have a question?
Oh, yes.
Bill, also. Okay, you may proceed.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. I would like to, yes, thank you, Representative Frazier. So there was, I watched an interview from Carol Levin, a MinPost journalist, and maybe he's here, I don't know, but Eric Black, who was in favor of ranked choice voting. He said, I suppose the biggest argument against it is that it's another level of confusion, possibly, and even discourage people from voting if they feel overwhelmed by the requirement to have three choices. So, I mean, are you confident that voters are going to be well informed on all of their choices on the ballot?
Representative Frazier.
I think a big part of this, with the task force and the conversation that's going to be had, I think one of the recommendations going to come out of there is how do we make sure we educate the populace on how to effectively go into the booth and use ranked choice voting. I think that's something that the Congresswoman talked about with the resources that Alaska put into their education process. And I think when you invest in that part of it, I'm fairly confident that because it will require candidates to engage outside their base with a broader coalition, I'm fairly confident that voters will be informed on those top three choices that they have to make. Yes.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Frazier. Don't candidates already have that ability to reach out outside of their base, like in a primary?
Representative Frazier.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to have the ability, and it's another to actually function in that way. In a practical sense, our democracy right now is not functioning in a way that candidates are reaching out beyond their base. I mean, that's just the reality that we live in right now.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you have any bipartisan support for this within the Minnesota House of Representatives?
Thank you, Representative Davis. There was, if members of the audience could please silence their
Do you want me to
phones,
repeat?
that would be appreciated. Did you hear the question, or, Representative Frazier, or were you distracted by the rooster?
Thank you, Representative Frazier.
Okay,
I was
Representative Frazier.
I was tracking the rooster, and I also tracked the question.
It's impressive.
At the moment, I haven't checked recently. I don't believe that we have a GOP member signed onto the bill, but we are still going through the process, and I never rule out that we won't get there. As we go through the process. And as you know, you've seen me bring a bill to the floor that had no GOP support until it got to the floor, but it did have GOP votes when we left the floor. So I'm confident.
Yeah. Representative Davis, final follow-up, maybe? Okay, I'll give you two more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, maybe I can get one final here. You do not have bipartisan support in the Minnesota House of Representatives. Not one single Republican has signed on to it. And I've asked our entire caucus if anyone is in support of it, and they are not. And so we heard from Secretary of State Steve Simon. He said that this is going to structurally change our elections, and in my opinion, this is going to fundamentally change our elections in the state. He also pointed out that these cities have chosen to do it, and here we're going in the direction of the state making that choice for everyone locally. And so we're robbing the local authorities of their choice if this goes through. So you don't have bipartisan support for it, and it's going to structurally and fundamentally change our elections. And I just, if it's going to change our elections that much, Representative Frazier, I would encourage you to get bipartisan support, because right now you do not have it, and I do not think that we should be making a decision when it comes to our elections without bipartisan support from the people that this state elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Davis. Just to clarify the record, if you look to the delete all amendment on line 8.2, it does say the political subdivisions may adopt. So this is a local option. They're not required to adopt ranked choice voting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that clarification.
Thank you. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Frazier. So on this committee, and I appreciated Representative Bonner's comments earlier. So, she was speaking on the last bill, that we really need to be doing things that's going to create integrity and security of the vote. And I agree with her 100%. So when we started on this committee, I think this is what we all agreed on, the committee, that elections absolutely have to, three things, that elections absolutely have to be bipartisan, right? They have to be secure, that we all believe that this is a secure election so that we have that confidence to vote. And then the last thing is that we have confidence, and that is allowing us to all feel like we have the vote. So with that being said, Representative Frazier, Alaska, we had the Congresswoman. I was actually going to ask her a question, but she left. So in the Alaskan election, they, as we know, moved to RCV. And I'm just going to quote from a couple of kind of liberal papers. The Hill, November 23rd, Alaska set to announce results from confusing RCV. November 23rd. The election was November 8th. Alaska Beacon, November 30th. Alaska finally certifies final election results, but 3 state house races have more hurdles. November 30th. Again, November 8th was the election. So my question, Representative Frazier, 22 days after the election, if our goals are to be bipartisan, secure, and for the public to have confidence in our elections, when this is the results of Alaska, how can we in Minnesota be supporting ranked choice voting?
Representative Frazier.
You're asking are you asking me the question?
I'm saying that was the actual results from Alaska. That was the actual timeline. And now they're working to repeal it. Why are we considering a bill of voting that failed in Alaska?
Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Altendorf, I can't speak to whether or not it failed or not. It hasn't been repealed. What I can speak to, if you want me to opine on the timeline, I think you should always take the time to get it right. I think that's important, which is also the reason why we're implementing this task force to work out the details, which I think are critical to make sure we get this right.
Representative Altendorf. Any follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Frazier, on this task force, can you talk to me about the guarantees that we are going to have election officials, county auditors, and people that are involved with the election process, on this committee, no political people that are being elected in any way. Can you give me some sort of support or let me know exactly what this task force is going to be built up of?
Thank you, Representative Altendorf. I'll turn it to Representative Frazier as well, but since you weren't the only one who drafted the amendment that we adopted, there is a majority. I will just respond first that there's a majority of election administrators, nonpartisan election administrators on the task force, 13 out of 25 members. I don't know if you hadn't. I was trying to add it up really quickly, but so I don't have the exact line in front of me at this point, but wanted to mention that. I don't know if you have any follow-up, Representative Frazier?
No, that is accurate. It is a majority of election officials. That is in conversation with our Secretary of State, who spoke earlier about the important role that his office will play in this in terms of being an administrator and making sure we answer those critical questions that need to be answered. I will say that we also want to make sure that we have representation from the community on those groups. And when I speak about that, you've heard people testify about voter suppression and things of that nature. We want to make sure that we have voices on the committee that can ensure that the conversations around how we're going to educate communities to ensure that we don't have any issues with folks being disenfranchised are important as well. So we're going to continue to work as we move forward to make sure we get the right balance and right makeup on the task force, because I think that's important for Minnesota.
Representative Altendorf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in my final comments, we heard that this this organization, or Fair Vote, I'm sorry, that they are very, very well funded, very well funded. And a lot of their testimonies, anyone can go back and look at them. They're based off of emotion and fear. They also play the emotions of the public, that we don't like negative campaigning, which is, of course, nobody likes the negative campaigning. But I ask people to consider, consider the level of that this organization has been funded. It also was brought up that we don't want to have spoiler candidates. And I would say that ranked choice voting, actually, if anything I've ever seen, does bring in spoiler candidates so that they can be funded. Because, earlier, this is really interesting to me, but this committee, we've discussed how we didn't like in a couple of the presidential elections that the president was not voted in by the popular vote, the majority vote. And here we go. Ranked choice voting, you could have 33% of the vote, 40% of the vote, and you could be the winner with 70% of the population not picking you as the first candidate. So ranked choice voting actually does bring in spoiler candidates, something like we've never seen before, ever, in our elections. And I just final comment, but we heard testifiers from Bloomington very, very nicely and adequately telling us of how the voters are against this. And so that's a place that tried this. They're against it. And then I'm just going to finish with someone from St. Paul who also has adopted ranked choice voting. And she said, I'm expressing my disagreement for the creation of ranked choice voting. We have it in St. Paul, and all it does is keep the elected officials who receive the most votes after several disqualifying rounds in office. I have asked, this is from a person, I have asked everyone I know who lives in St. Paul, and not one of them admits to voting for Carter or any of the council members in their district. We do not need ranked choice voting to go statewide. So I would ask, I wore green today because it's St. Patrick's Day. The majority party has not allowed us to have amendments, has not agreed on anything, but something this important that in Minnesota, we have to have bipartisan support for our elections. I wore green today because I thought I am going to have the luck of Irish today, and we're going to get the Democrats to agree with us just once that we are not going to push against the Minnesota people and do something that the Minnesota people do not want.
Okay, please hold off on applause. That we don't generally allow that. I saw that, Representative Bliss. I'll still call on you, Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really, my questions are going to be, just repeated what we have down here. But I think it's important that we bring it up. Why are we doing this? Why are we bringing this forward now? We've got multiple jurisdictions across the country that are voting this out, are calling it into question. Results not coming in for a month after the election. We have voter disenfranchisement run amok in this. When you lose tens of thousands of votes that go towards the final vote, that's voter disenfranchisement. You know, it was brought up that this increases diversity in the candidate pool. I would argue differently. We have year after year after year in the Minnesota House of Representatives have become more diverse without ranked choice voting. This is going to be hugely expensive to our counties. It's going to disenfranchise lots and lots and lots of voters. And I find it interesting, the timing that we're bringing this to committee, because it's going to increase the number of candidates on a ballot. And the very next bill we're going to hear is to cut the number of people on the ballot. So I guess well, it's not really a question, it's a comment again. Why? Why now? And I know some people have used local cities as an argument in favor of ranked choice voting. Myself, I would use it as an argument in opposition of ranked choice voting. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bliss. Representative Stevenson, did you want to be?
Mr. Chair, I just had a question for you, actually. I just heard that heard from a member saying that amendments were not allowed. How many amendments were submitted by members of the minority for this bill today?
Representative Stevenson, we don't need to go there, but
I withdraw the question.
That's to your point. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to request a roll call.
Roll call's been requested. There will be a roll call.
Second, I would like to thank everyone who's shown up today for this hearing. This is really great to have a room full of people discussing this very important issue. You know, I was here during COVID, and nothing like this could happen. So I appreciate being live, face-to-face, and hand-to-hand. And we all learn from this experience, and I want to thank you all for showing up. To the issue, ranked choice voting, we find it will be cumbersome, expensive, slow, not quicker, and difficult. It actually changes the behavior of both candidates and voters. During the, I believe, the most recent campaign for the mayor of Minneapolis, there was an active campaign, and I haven't got the picture with me, but there was a picture of Mayor Fry, and the headline or the line on it said, "Don't rank Fry." Well, they're encouraging people not to actually make their first, second, and third choice. They're encouraging them to eliminate a person from the selection because they think it gives them some advantage in this complicated process of counting ranked choice votes. I'm not going to go on forever here. I have a lot of things on my list. Many of them have been expressed by my colleagues. We know that this, at this point, does not have bipartisan support. We don't believe it will improve the integrity of our elections, and we do not believe it will increase public confidence in the results of our elections. I'm going to be voting no, and I suggest the rest of my colleagues and anyone else vote no.
Thank you, Lead Torkelson. Representative Bonner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Cedric. Representative Frazier. Sorry, can't quite get it out this morning. My apologies on that. I just wanted to kind of ground us a little bit. First, I just want to say that, you know, we talked here today about if someone chooses a candidate that doesn't ultimately succeed in the end, that they've been disenfranchised or that their vote hasn't been counted. And I just want to say, as we do elections today, if your candidate doesn't have enough votes to win, your candidate doesn't have enough votes to win. That remains the same regardless of the method of voting. It doesn't mean, does that mean that every single voter who doesn't pick the winner has been disenfranchised? I don't think that's the argument that we're trying to make, and I don't think that's a really fair equivalency. So we probably should be thoughtful about our rhetoric on that. And also, I just wanted to say there was an implication about going against the one vote, one voice principle. And regardless of the method of voting, every vote that comes forward only gets counted one time. It gets counted as one voice, right? So in the ultimate results, we aren't we aren't giving someone more voice. Each individual gets the same amount of voice that they've always had. So I just want to be thoughtful about that as well, that rhetoric is not accurate. But let's get back to grounding on this bill specifically and what it's doing. This bill is allowing, on great measure, the local option. We talk a lot about local option here. It gives those cities who choose to have ranked choice voting the ability to choose it for themselves. They vote on it. So I think we want to also be careful that we're not implying that this is being foisted upon someone. It is not. It is a choice that folks can make. And secondly, the bill itself has a robust task force to explore this question so that should a city choose this as a method, because they do want to see a behavior in the change of candidates. They do want to see candidates who are seeking out folks on a deeper level, across party lines. They still can do that, and if that feels right to them, but it's also a task force that says, if we're going to do this, let's do it in a smart way. Let's do our homework. Let's make sure that we avoid some of the pitfalls of some of these cities who've had it rolled out and maybe didn't get it right out of the gate, and avoid those complications or those frustrations. And I think that just makes sense because it is important to have a sense of security in the way things operate. And so, making sure that we're doing our due diligence in advance, that we're using the lessons learned from other cities across the state to actually be able to roll this out in a smart way for those cities who choose to opt in, I think is the right thing to do. We do see more cities expressing a desire to move in this direction. And so it makes sense as elected officials that we say, look, we want this to be safe and secure. We want people to have confidence. And so we want to do our homework first and make sure that we do it in the right way. So I appreciate that, Representative Frazier, and just wanted to bring us back to grounding. Thank you.
Thank you. No additional members are on the list, so I'll just take a moment as chair once again to thank everybody on both sides who came here. I agree with Lead Torkelson completely that it is great to see such a big turnout and interest in this topic. It is a really interesting one, frankly. Representative Frazier, thank you for all the work you've done on this. I know it hasn't been easy. I know there's a lot of people with a lot of different views on this on both sides of the aisle. I think you've done a tremendous amount of hard work trying to get to a point where there's consensus, or at least support for it, that it will move forward. Maybe I should not call it consensus based on what some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said. But I do think this is a reasonable approach that you're taking in this bill. I think the local option is something we've been talking about for years and has been out there for a while. We know 5 cities have this, and it's generally worked pretty well there. I think ranked choice voting is a system that has the potential to reduce the spoiler effect, to increase positive campaigning, and I think giving cities the option of adopting this system has a lot of potential to make our elections more interesting. And I also think the task force is a really important component of this bill as well. I think it's balanced. It has lots of expertise from nonpartisan election administrators, and I really look forward to seeing what they will come up with. So with that, Representative Frazier, I will let you make the closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree. This is wonderful because this is the democratic process. This is democracy. We're here, we're having this debate, and we're hearing voices from either side of where they land on this issue. And I think that's important. That's what this democracy is about. I did want to point out just one fact. Representative Aldendorf, you talked about St. Paul. I would encourage that member to get outside their circle and talk to more people, because when Mayor Carter won his election, it was on the first ballot both times, and he got over 50% of the vote. So they may not have voted for him, but a lot of people did. So I hope they would get out and talk to more of their neighbors. I think that's important. That's also what democracy is about as well. This is simply to put a task force together to ensure that we get this right, to ensure that we're going to provide the local option, and so that when those local jurisdictions decide to do it, we will have answered many of the questions that they need answered to ensure that they can do this in a way where there's no confusion, to where we continue to have the high voter participation that we have in the state of Minnesota. And that is one of the most important things to me as I carry this bill. That's one of the reasons why we're operating in this fashion. I'm taking in information from all stakeholders to try to make sure we do this the best way possible. That's it. In my district, there are cities that want to do this that can't right now by law. There are cities that are outside of my district around the state that want to do this right now but can't do this by law. We want to provide them the option to do this, and we want to make sure that they have the tools that are necessary to ensure that they do it right. That's the point of it all. So I'd urge members to vote yes on this, and let's keep this process moving so we can continue to have this conversation.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. With that, I will renew the motion that House File 2486, as amended, be recommended to be re-referred to the State and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee. A roll call has been requested, so the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Vice Chair Greenman.
Yes.
Minority Leader Torkelson.
No.
Representative Agbaje. Representative Altendorf.
No.
Representative Bonner.
Aye.
Representative Bliss.
No.
Representative Coulter.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Frederick.
Aye.
Representative Purcell.
Aye.
Representative Quam is excused. Representative Stevenson.
Yes.
There being 7 ayes and 4 nays, the motion is approved. The bill is referred.